Hello and welcome to Teachopedia. In today's video, I will be sharing some key functions that will help you in exploring any type of dataset. So let's get started. The first function is loading or reading data, and the functions which pandas will give for reading and loading data, they are read Excel, read CSV, and toExcel and toCSV. Read Excel will be used for reading an Excel file. Read CSV will be used for reading a CSV file. toExcel and toCSV on the other side will be used how to write a data frame into an Excel sheet or a CSV file. Now let's implement these functions. Import pandas as PD. Then we will going to explore these functions and write these functions and read a file. So here I have committed some things just to let you know how to use the other type of functions. I have a CSV file called property.data.csv and I'm using pd.readcsv and just reading that file. After reading that file, I am saving that file into a data frame called data. On the other side, if you have a read Excel sheet, you could use read Excel and just define your file name. The other case is that you can define a whole path of that file. In this case, I am reading an txt, which is type of a CSV file and it's tab delimiter. So I have defined that user delimiter tab when reading a CSV file. So I'm reading a text file into a CSV using CSV function and saving that into a df data frame. On the other side, if you have a link like this and you have a format like tsv, which is used for tabular CSV file, you could use read CSV, then just pass your URL, then separator. In separator, define the delimiter like tab, and then define the encoding if needed. After reading your data, you could print that data as well. So I have read some data and just print dot head to just show you how the data look like. So here we have some indexes and it just printed the first 5 rows. So we see that how we can read a certain file and save it into a data frame. Now let's check how to write a data into a file. So here the in the previous cell I have created a data frame called data, and now I am writing that data frame into an Excel sheet using toExcel or toCSV. The index false will not write these indexes into an Excel sheet. So if I run this by shift enter, I will get a file called check.excel, and in that whole data set will be transferred or copied. So here, as you can see, we have all the data and they are around 9 rows. The second function which we will be going to see is how to print our data. And in the functions we have dot head and dot tail. Dot head will give you the first 5 rows of your dataset. Dot tail will give you the last 5 rows of your dataset. Now let's try to implement these functions. So in the print data, I am using dot head and dot tail one by one. When I use dot head with my data frame like data dot head, it will give me the first 5 rows of my dataset. And then if I use dot tail with my data frame, it will give the last 5 rows, and as you can see it's printing from 4 till 8. So it give you the last 5 rows, and we have already 9 rows and start from 0, so you get a certain idea. Apart from that, you could also use dot columns and dot shape just to check what are the different type of column in this dataset, and dot shape will give you the overall rows and columns. So here we have 9 rows and 7 columns, 1 2 3 4 5 6 and 7. The third function which we going to see is summarize data. How to summarize our data. And the pandas function which we going to see is dot describe. It will give you a brief summary of your individual column in your dataset. So let's check it out. So use the data frame, that is data, and call this function dot describe. It will give you an overall picture of your column or each column, and it will by default it will give you only the integer or float columns. So here I am getting the information about only those columns which have integer or float type. So we have only two columns, PID and stnum. So here I'm getting the count, the overall count, the mean of that column, the standard deviation, the minimum value in that column, the 25%, these are contrail range, and then the maximum value in that column. To include all the columns which are object or string columns, we use include is equals to all, and it will give you all column information. Here as you can see it's printing nan for mean, standard deviation, minimum, maximum, because it's a object column. So here we are getting only the overall count of this column, the unique values present in that column, the top value, and the frequency of that value. So this function will give you a brief overview of how your individual column look like. The fourth function which we are going to see will give you the information of your dataset, and the function is .info. Now let's implement this function. So here you can see that I have called .info function with my data frame data. So what it will give us is that we get the overall count of our data, that is it starts from 0 to 8, which means we have 9 rows. The total number of columns, that is we have 7 columns. The individual column information, like whether what is its data type, that is float, and whether it's an object type, that is object. The non-null will give you that whether it contains a null value or not, and this means that we have no null value in this PID column. This 7 non-null mean that we have got a 1 value which is null in this stnum column, and same goes for other. In the end we can see that we have data types, and we have 2 float type column and 5 object type column, and there is a memory usage of this data set. So it will give you a brief information how your data set type is and whether it's contain a null value or not. The fifth function, or the last function which we'll be going to see, is how to find the null values. And the pandas function which we are going to see is null, that will help us in finding the null values or the count of null values in our dataset. So let's check it out. So here I am calling .isNet function with my data frame, and it will give me brief, like a structure of whether it's contain a null value or not, by denoting false and true. False means there is no null value, and true means there is a null value. So PID columns contain one null value, stnum contains two null values, stnew contains no null values. So to check the individual count of null values, we could use .isNull.sum, and it will give the integer values whether it contains a null value or not. So PID contains 1, stnum contains 2 null values, stname contains no null values. So through this we can check whether it contains a null value or what is the count of that null value in the dataset. So in this whole notebook, we got to see how to read our data, how to print our data, how to export our data into a file, how to use, how to find out what are the total columns, what are the total shape of our data, how to get the summarized information of our dataset, how to get to know what are the types of our individual column, how to find the null values and what are the count of those null values. So I hope you enjoy today's video. If you have any queries, do let me know. Until next time, thank you so much.